Hi, everyone. My name is Ted Burkhan. I am president and co-founder of a agency in New York City called Hot Paper Lantern. And I've been on the council for many years now. I kind of lost track of how many years. And we were just talking with Jen and Beth and TR before all of you joined that while we're really glad to be here today and to do this session with you virtually, it kind of pains us that we can't be there in person and be in Charleston with all of you. So hopefully next year, but for now, this will do, and hopefully this will be an informative session. So I'm going to kick it off, and then I'm going to turn it over to my friend TR, who's going to talk a little bit as well. But just by show of either real hands or virtual hands in the Zoom function, can you please just let us know how many of you actually have a LinkedIn profile right now? So I'm seeing most of you. Okay, good. And be honest with this one, okay? Because we're all friends here. How many of you have actually updated your profile recently and feel really good about it, feel like it really represents who you are and your skills and what you have to offer to future employers? Okay, a little bit here and there. All right, good. Well, that's good. It's always good to get a sense of the audience and how involved you are on the platform. So what TR and I are going to take you through today are some high level thoughts and suggestions. I'm going to kind of approach it from the content side of the house, and TR is going to approach it more from the recruiting side. And then happy to answer your questions. And I know this is a fairly short time session, so if there are additional questions after the session ends.
Hey, it's Bruce. I apologize.
Oh, hi, Bruce. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I can't be on video, unfortunately, but I will be able to.
Okay. Yeah, and Bruce, we can't really hear you. Your connection's pretty rough. But why don't you just, maybe you can chime in whenever we're missing something, so we're not putting you on the spot with your connection.
Got it.
Great. So why don't we get started? TR, I'll kick it over to you if you wanted to sort of chat a little bit about the profile section and the recruiting aspect, and then I can talk about the content section.
Sure. So I think one of the overarching points that I would make, so first, TR Straub, I'm the chair of the advisory council. I also am an executive recruiter that focuses on corporate affairs, so communications, government affairs, policy, so functionally very specific, but then work across all industries and sectors. And so I look at folks that have this communications, public affairs, marketing background all day. And I spend more time than I care to admit on the LinkedIn platform, both on the like public version of it, and also there's a LinkedIn recruiter, which goes into even more depth and is even nerdier than the main platform. But I think the main point that I would make about LinkedIn is that it should be a clear representation of who you are and how you want to be received by professional colleagues and potential employers. And I'm also a big believer in the fact that it should be as detailed as you feel comfortable making it. And often I think it should be a pretty mirror image of your resume, so that you're really clear about your responsibilities, but even more than that, your accomplishments and what you're proud of. And I'm looking at one of you who raised your hand, and I won't call a name out, but I pulled up your LinkedIn and immediately was struck by just like the background picture was really visually appealing. You had some featured content in there, including a link to your website. There's a clear about summary of like who you are, what you stand for. I'm looking at your the different roles and internships that you have held. It is clear. The images are updated for the organizations. You very clearly articulated what your responsibilities were in each of those roles. And so I just feel like looking at this, I got a really clear sense of who you are, what you're interested in, some of the work that you've done. And that is exactly what, especially in this field, what I'm looking for. Like, I want to be able to very quickly get a sense of what are you good at, what do you want to do? Often because like I need to look through hundreds of profiles and I need things to very clearly jump out at me. And the easier you can make it for me and the easier you can make it for employers, the better off you're going to be. And also you want it to be a really clear representation of who you are, is I think the overarching point I would make with that.
Great. And so I'll jump in and talk a little bit about, as a employer in the industry, someone who hires many professionals at all levels of the profession throughout the year, what I typically look for and what we typically look for on the LinkedIn platform when we're reviewing candidates. And so what TR just talked about with the profile, incredibly important. It's kind of like the table stakes that you have to have. And then we do a little bit of a deeper dive really around the content that candidates publish on LinkedIn on a regular basis. And there's a few ways to do that. How many of you have actually published an article or even a status update or a post on LinkedIn? Some of you? Okay. So I would highly recommend, for those of you who have done it, continue to do it on a consistent basis. For those of you who haven't done it, start to think about how you can do it on a more regular basis. So there's a few ways to do it. One is you can actually write articles and post articles on your LinkedIn profile. And they can be about, anything you want them to be about. I recommend, you focus on subjects related to the communications profession, things that you're doing in school, maybe internships that you've had. We can talk about a lot of different potential topics. These articles are typically several hundred words in length. And it's a great way to show your perspective and your points of view on topics and issues that might be of interest to future employers like my firm. The other way to do it, and so, something that's has a little bit lower barrier of entry, is just posting in your LinkedIn feed. So that could be sharing a link to an article. It could be re-sharing a post that someone in your network made that you think is interesting. So, if I saw TR posted about a research report that his firm produced, I could share it and or like it or comment it, very similar to the way a lot of other social media platforms work. This does a few things. And the reason why it's important is because, first and foremost, as candidates, you need to try to differentiate yourself. And TR, tell me if you disagree with this or if you've seen things differently, but most candidates that we see do not publish content on a regular basis on LinkedIn. So right away, if you start to do it and you're doing it in the right way, you're going to start to differentiate from a lot of other candidates out there. So it's really critical. Two, it's a great way to actually network on LinkedIn. It's a great excuse to get in touch with people that you're already connected in with, or reach out and try to connect with new people by showing that type of engagement and that type of activity. So it's a great way to build your network on LinkedIn. And just like networking in general, it never really stops. So you should always be looking to grow your network and add people in. And posting content is a great way to do that because it also adds value, right? You're giving out perspective, you're sharing content that hopefully will be seen as a value by not just the people in your network, but future employers, before and while you're going through the interview process. So I think if you look at both of these things, what TR talked about with the profile building and then what I'm talking about with the content side of it, if you put those two together, that's what really makes a very robust LinkedIn profile. And again, it's something that will help differentiate you from a lot of other candidates, especially at the entry level, because a lot of entry level candidates just don't take that extra step to do that type of content publishing.
Yeah, this is Bruce. Would it be appropriate for me to add a couple more things?
Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
And his audio is much better now, I take it?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thanks for everyone's indulgence and apologies. So on the profile building thing, there's one thing that I would say is important not to neglect. Increasingly, companies that are hiring are very, very, very thoughtful about their corporate culture. And they want to be, they're really looking not just can you do the work, but what kind of person are you and how are you going to fit in with our colleagues? Are you going to be a culture carrier inside of our company, or someone that's fun and interesting and is going to make the workplace a positive place to be in? So don't neglect the bottom part of that profile where you have an opportunity to talk to list the organizations that you've been a part of and your volunteer activities and those kinds of things. because increasingly companies like mine are looking at them to see, do you carry your interests, in the classroom, outside of the classroom? Do you work in organizations that tell us that you work and play well with others in the sandbox? And don't forget to include that in what TR mentioned, that about statement as well. That about statement is important because it's a chance for you to tell us a story about yourself that's bigger than, your grade point average, or that you were the president of a club, or that you were on the crew team or whatever. It can really kind of tell us where you see yourself going in the future, and that entire profile works together, to tell a story about yourself that can be really important. So think about all those aspects of it in that regard.
And the other point that I would add here, and this is a little bit more of a mechanical point, and I'm going to share my screen to kind of reinforce this here. So this is my LinkedIn homepage, and I share with you that so this is the page that everyone would see. There's also, so I have access to something called Recruiter, which gives me a little bit, basically gives me access to more detailed information. But if I were to go in and change my own profile, so if you go up to me, you click view profile, you can actually change your settings so that recruiters specifically can see different things about your profile. So these are not, so if you make some of these changes and you go show recruiters you're open to work, you can go through and say, I'm interested in, and you can add a job title here. You can say communications specialist or communications trainee, right? You can go and add another title here. You can say where you want to work. You can say I'm open to remote work. You could say I could start immediately, the different types of jobs that you want. And then you also get to say I can say all LinkedIn members can see this, in which case it's going to give you that open to work green kind of border logo that you've probably seen on some people's profiles. Or you can check the box that just says recruiters only, which means that you will pop up to the top of the results when recruiters are looking for it. And we can actually filter, which candidly we sometimes do because we know that people are going to be more responsive if we need to drum up candidates more quickly. And it also means that if you're, let's say you're 5 years down the line and you're working at an agency and you don't want the people at your agency to know that you're looking, but you want other people to know that you're looking. If you're working at Edelman and you don't want people at Edelman to know, but you really want the people at Hot Paper Lantern to know that they could contact you and that you're open to hearing about things, that'll allow you to do that. So you have a little bit of flexibility there. And it does, this is one of those things that it just allows you to make yourself more optimized as other people are searching for you. And you can also go through and update other information that is really clear about here's what I'm looking for, here's why I'm looking for it. And that narrative will not show up in your public profile. It'll only be available to those that pay for that recruiter platform and are not within your current organization.
Any questions that the group has?
Yeah, I have one. So it's not really necessarily about LinkedIn, but more or less after and once you form those connections, what is the best way that you guys think someone should go about maintaining that relationship? And just because I find that I get a relationship, but I don't know down the line how I'm supposed to how often I'm supposed to reach out to them, what I should be asking them, different things like that.
It's a great question. I think so. I'll just jump in and start, and then I'm sure the others have thoughts too. I think the key is you want to reach out with purpose, right? So it's not just sort of a random touch base where you're not adding any value. And one of the ways to do that I've done over the course of my career, whether it's within LinkedIn or just within email, is share a piece of content with them. Doesn't need to be a piece of content that you've created. It could be something that you read that you think is interested. It may relate back to something that you spoke to this person about before, or it may just be something that you think they might be relevant to them. And say, hey, I saw this piece of this article. It made me think of you. I thought you'd be interested in it. Hope you're well. Let's catch up soon. Something like that. It's a great excuse to get in touch with someone out of the blue. And the other thing too, I think that has changed since COVID has hit and the fact that we're all in a remote environment, I have found, strangely, that networking actually has become somewhat easier in some ways, because people are more open to do a Zoom catch-up versus trying to coordinate a conference call or a time to meet in person at a restaurant, whatever. So, every now and then you might want to reach out to certain individuals and say, hey, do you have 15 to 30 minutes to do a quick catch up? I'd love to bring you up to speed on what I'm working on, and I'd also love to hear what you're working on. Something along those lines.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
this
would
is
make it breezy and casual too. I mean, because there is the high likelihood that someone's going to say, I don't have time right now. And I would just respond and be really understanding about that and say, completely understand. Here are the things that I would love for you to keep in mind about me. Please keep me in touch, and I promise to do the same. Something like that, because we're all just, like, you never know how much someone has on their particular plate. Sorry, Bruce.
No, I was going to say the way that I've answered that question before is with 4 quick words, and it's don't ghost, but don't stalk. I guess that's 5 words. Don't neglect the contact. And I like the concept of reaching out with purpose. And, if you have a reason, also when someone else posts content, if I were to post an article that was about the College of Charleston or about, mentorship programs or things like that, that's something that you could feel free to jump in and, do a reply on. Because again, that would be purposeful. It would make sense. The connection is fairly obvious. But, I'd be a little careful on the other hand about, every little suggestion that LinkedIn feeds you about the opportunity to do something on someone's page, just be thoughtful. Again, let it have a purpose. Because for some, it can be a little bit of a turnoff. You're trying to be present without necessarily screaming, and then just kind of read the cues in terms of, as TR said, how people handle those reach outs. There's a time for everything, and one of the things that I've learned is we never know what's going on in people's lives. So just because someone says no today doesn't mean that they don't want to continue having a relationship with you and they aren't interested in hearing from you. So don't get discouraged. Take what people say at face value.
Thank you, guys.
Great advice. I think Sierra had a question.
Yep.
Yes, I am in Dr. Goodyear's leadership capstone, and so we're really honing in on our LinkedIn profiles. And so I had not written my about statement yet, and I just started crafting one a few days ago, but I don't think it really portrays myself. So what would you suggest for an about statement that really stands out? What do you look for specifically besides the future aspect? What do you hope to do? Sort of some of those things.
I mean, I think for me, like I struggle to, if I haven't like talked something out, it's hard for me to then like put it on the paper. Like I need to have some sort of like framework in my mind and have like bounce it around, and then I can distill it in writing. And so I would recommend like going to 4 different friends, or to like 2 friends and a professor and a mentor, and say, like practice articulating to them out loud, like here's what I'm really good at, here's what I want to be known for, and here's the type of work that I want to do, and like talk that out loud and do it in your own voice. And so I would say like being as specific as possible and as authentic as possible. Like LinkedIn is a professional platform, but it doesn't have to be stiff, especially in this communications world. So I would just try to make it be like just make it be like true to who you are. I think the other thing too is like make sure that any sort of keywords stand out. So if you really want to be known for brand, or you really want to be known for content development, or you're great at graphic design, or you're great at writing, make sure that pops out of there, and that you're not just using general terms like I'm a communications expert, or whatever it might be, because everyone is, right? And so what makes you different?
Yeah, for goodness sakes, avoid being a guru. It's fascinating how many LinkedIn profiles, TR's laughing, but it's fascinating how many LinkedIn invitations I get from people that claim that they're a guru or an expert or something like that. And it's just kind of sad. But one other thing about your about statements that I would say is go down and look at the rest of your profile and ask yourself what it adds up to, and make sure that if we were to read your about profile, we will look down and see something that adds up to what you say you are an expert at, or what you say you are interested in, or what you say your superpower actually is. You know, it doesn't mean you can't be interested in growing into something new, and you can say it and characterize it that way. But to TR's point, if you do say that, you know, you're skilled at graphic design and very, very interested in it, then I would look down your profile and I would expect to see, you know, an extracurricular activity or an internship or some skill proficiency on platforms that graphic designers use. So just make sure your story is sort of supported by the evidence that shows up underneath it in the profile.
Great. We've got a couple minutes left. Do we have one last question?
Yeah, I have one more. Obviously, like you guys, when you got into the communications field, I'm assuming you didn't really know where you wanted to go with communications. I mean, it's such a broad field. So like at this point in your career, how did you more or less like narrow down the direction that you guys wanted to take?
It's a great question. For me, it was more figuring out what I didn't like versus what I did like, at least very early on. So I started off as a journalist, and then I moved into government and was a spokesperson for New York City government. And I liked both of those professions, but not enough to make a career out of them. But I didn't know that until I went in, tried it, and then experienced it. And then I landed on the agency side and kind of grew up there and really enjoyed a lot of what agency life had to offer. So, you know, that's why internships are so critical, right? It's not just for the experience, but it's to teach you what you like, what you don't like, what you might be good at, what you're not so good at, where you need to improve. It's all about learning and adjusting and using those experiences to make better decisions about where you want to take your career down the road.
Yeah, I would agree. A little bit of trial and error is a good thing. Most of the people that I run into in the advisory council, you know, have kind of bounced through 2 or 3 different things. They didn't start as an internship at Bigco, and then, you know, got hired as an associate, and then became a director, and then became a VP and an SVP and an EVP. They went out and tried some things and honed their skills and found out they were good at some things and maybe not so good at some things, and that's okay, because it does help you decide, you know, where you find joy and where you find purpose. You know, but I mean, I do think we're seeing a couple of things. Having a background of working in politics has become something that I think is we're seeing a lot of interest in that. I think it has to do with speed of communications, and just how you kind of have to stand out there on your own in the hurricane sometimes and learn and trial by fire. So we're seeing a lot of that. And of course, you know, everyone is interested in anyone that has at least a rudimentary understanding of not just social media platforms, but really how to measure it and how to understand the sentiment and how to understand what's relevant and what's not. And, you know, a lot of companies are really waking up to the fact that content is king and they can do their own publishing. And so that's an area that I think a lot of folks are interested in as well.
So we are out of time, but before we let everybody go, let's have from each of our panelists in 30 seconds or less, your best final tips before we head out.
Well, I'll go super tactical. Just remember, everyone you meet in the professional setting, make sure you also connect with them on LinkedIn. I can't tell you how many times I have meetings with people and then I never hear from them on LinkedIn. It's crazy. It's low hanging fruit. And it's a great way to stay connected.
Agree with that entirely. I would also say like other people's posts. It makes them feel good and makes them like you. It's the same thing as Instagram or Facebook. And I think the other thing, just in to the question about figuring out what you want to do, I would just say it's important to have direction and momentum, but you should also be open-minded about being taken off course. And I think as long as you're heading in the right direction, be open-minded and consider other things, because you never really know what you're going to end up liking.
And this is Bruce. The last thing that I would say is don't forget to keep your profile updated. There's nothing that tells me that you might not be serious than coming in and seeing inconsistencies because you updated one part of your profile but not another, or your email says that you're one place and your profile says you're another. And by the way, every time you update it, it pushes notifications out to people that you're connected to. So it's just kind of a cheap and easy way to stay front and center with people when you do make those updates. So don't forget to make them. Have good LinkedIn hygiene, I guess would be a way to put it.
Great advice all around today. Ted, TR, Bruce, thank you so much for all your time and your information. And thanks to all of our students who joined in.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Being here, everyone.
Thank you.
Take
guys
care.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.